Hello, I'm Dale Yurton, and welcome to our study on living a life of significance. It makes no difference where you are, what's going on around you. There's no excuse for God's plan and purpose not to be fulfilled in your life. This is a second story of Elisha and the Shunammite lady, and I'm going to call this lesson Determination. Determination. Actually, I'm going to teach it in two parts, so be sure not only to listen to this lesson, but also the next one. This part A, I'm going to call it Dealing with People. Determination, dealing with people. Let me take for our text 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, verses 32 through 35. Elisha came into the house, and there was the child, lying dead on his bed. He went in, therefore, and shut the door behind the two of them and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child. And the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house and again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Oh, what an amazing story. Anytime you read about the dead being raised, that is something very special, something very significant. Now, there are several things that I learned from this story. Let me share them with you. The first point I want to share is the devil always attempts to steal the promise. Now, I need to read that again because that's going to happen in your life. God never gives us a promise that the devil does not attempt to steal it. He always will. Jesus warned us of this. In John the 10th chapter and verse 10, he said, the thief, he's talking about the devil, the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. That's Satan's strategy for our lives. So let me give you point A of beware, the devil always tries to steal the promise. Don't be careless with the promise of God. I've seen too many people that God was faithful and he gave them his promise. He met the promise within their life, but they were careless. As the Bible said, while men slept, the enemy came. Don't be careless with the promise. I really believe that is what's taking place here. It's harvest time, and the boy he's big enough now to go out to the field with his father. It's harvest time. What could go wrong? I mean, everything is ready. We're gathering in the harvest. What could go wrong? Well, something bad went wrong. Now, I don't want to be too difficult on the father here because, first of all, the Bible doesn't say much about him at all. We don't even know how old he was. We just know the Bible describes him as an old man. When God says you're an old man, you're an old man. So we know he's an old man, but that's all we know. It may have been his age that affected his judgment that day. But it's quite obvious he missed it. He didn't think anything serious was going on when the little boy began to complain that his head was hurting, saying, my head, my head. And the father just turned to one of the servants and said, take him to his mother. It's obvious he wasn't too concerned. And so this is the point B of this, the devil trying to steal the promise. The little boy probably had a sunstroke. We don't know for sure because the Bible doesn't go into detail about that. All we know, something was bad wrong. The little boy was complaining about his head. He probably was too small to even explain what's happening. But whatever it was, the boy's father didn't take the problem seriously. Please listen to me. Anytime the devil's trying to steal the promise, that's why he's trying to steal it. It's because it's something very precious. You must be alert. You must be on guard. Don't allow the devil to steal the promise. But the father is not alert. And so he's in 2 Kings 4:19, he just simply says to one of the servants, carry him to his mother. He doesn't inquire about him later. You see him asking no more questions about the boy. He obviously was not taking it serious. He's so preoccupied, probably with the harvest, so preoccupied he doesn't check to see how his son is doing. It doesn't leave him in very good light, but I wonder if we examine ourselves, how many times we too have been careless with the promise of God. And we thought because God promised it, it's automatic. It's going to be fulfilled. Nothing can happen to it. It's God's promise. And that's why the devil wants to destroy it, my friend. It's why he wants to steal it and take it away, is because he knows how precious it is. The second thing I would like to talk about, I see in this story, is don't panic when the attack comes. It will come. And you need to be building up your faith. You need to be linking your faith with other believers. You need to surround yourself with believers, because the attack will come. And one of the things that the devil always tries to do is to cause us to panic. When I look at this story, it said that the Shunammite lady, that she was an amazing person. That this lady, there's just something special about her. She responds totally different to this problem than her husband did. He didn't take it serious, just carry him to his mother. But she responds deliberately. She immediately puts a plan in action. I don't know if she had thought this through, prayed this through. She probably was hoping against hope that the little boy would get better, that she was not believing that God would allow him to die. But in 2 Kings 4:19 and 20, it says, when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon and then died. What do we do when the baby dies? So many people just fall apart. They just go into just frantic crying and screaming, and they lose all emotional control. Not this lady. Not this lady. No, she doesn't do that at all. She knows this child is a gift from God, and so she puts her plan into action. Here's the first thing that I see she does. Point A, remind yourself of God's promise. The way the story reads about her, that she gets up from the place where she's sitting. Obviously, she's downstairs. She climbs the steps, the stairs that leads up to the man of God's room on top of the wall. She opens the door, goes in, and lays her baby boy on the bed of the man of God. She shuts the door behind him and goes out. That is all very intentional, deliberate. She not just, I'm sure she was crying, I'm sure she was heartbroken over this, but she intentionally goes to the man of God's bed and lays him on the bed of the man of God. Why did she do that? She went back to the place where she received the promise. That's where the man of God was when he's just now enjoying this little apartment that she has built for him, and he's resting there. That's where he spoke the word and said, about this time next year, you will embrace a son. Oh, I'm speaking to some of you right now. That's what you need to do. You need to start reminding yourself of the promise of God. If God promised it, you must believe it. Don't allow the devil to destroy God's promise in your life. An interesting story I would like to tell you. And when I was pastoring in the state of Ohio, one night about 2 o'clock, I get a phone call, and that's never good when you're a pastor. At 2 o'clock and the phone rings, and this woman is crying hysterically. And finally, when I guessed who it was one of the members of the church. That she and her sister and her mother, very faithful members of the church. And I knew her dad was in the hospital, and so I called her by name, and is that you? And she was able to give some kind of affirmative answer. And I said, I'll be to the hospital as soon as I can. She said, the doctors have said my dad's not going to live tonight. So I'm driving to the hospital, and I'm praying as hard as I can pray. I'm seeking God and crying out to God for this boy, this man, to intercede for him. And all of a sudden, God spoke to me, a clear word. He will not die tonight. When I get to the hospital, I go back to the emergency room, up to the ICU ward, and when I walk in the room, it is full of fear. She, her mother, her sister, they're crying uncontrollably. They can't stop crying. I knew the first thing I had to do was refocus their attention, get their emotions under control. So I start hushing them like a crying baby, just, please, don't cry, don't cry. Listen to me. Don't cry, and just listen to me. God spoke to me while I was coming. As I was driving, and I'm crying out to God, and I appreciate the doctors. I know they're doing their best and giving you the best advice they can, but God spoke a word to me. He will not die tonight. And then I began to remind them of prophetic words that they had received over the years, that their dad was going to give his heart to Jesus, that he was going to become a believer. You remember what God said. Now that's what you've got to do. That's what the Shunammite lady's doing. She's reminding herself of the promise of God. The second thing that she does, point B, is she shut the door. Shut the door. I find that very interesting because faith comes by hearing a word from God. Faith does not come from talking with people. Now, too many times people are looking for somebody else to do the believing for them. They're looking for somebody else that has faith because they know they don't have it. That's not where faith comes from. It doesn't come from talking with people. And so notice, she doesn't even say anything to the boy's father. And he doesn't ask any questions. Oh, that's a sad part of the story. She doesn't say anything to the neighbors. What does she do? She shuts the door. And that's what you've got to do. Go back to the promise of God, what God said. And it's like, God said it, that settles it. Shut the door. This is what this lady does. No wonder she was able to receive her dead boy to life again. Now here's the third thing that I learned from this story. Be willing to sacrifice for the promise. Be willing to make the sacrifice. Point A, she knew where to go. She knew that the prophet Elisha was at Mount Carmel. Now, she asked her husband, please send a donkey and one of the boys, and I'm going to see the prophet today. And he just simply said, why are you going today? You can tell he is preoccupied with the harvest. She said, it'll be well, it'll be okay. Going to Mount Carmel. When you look at the map, Mount Carmel is 8.5 miles from Shunem. So she not only has to ride the donkey to Mount Carmel, she's got to turn around and bring the prophet back, ride the donkey back to Shunem again. That means she rode the donkey 17 miles that day. No wonder she is such a remarkable lady. Such a wonderful person. Amazing faith and determination. She's not going to let go of the promise of God. She's not going to allow the devil to steal him from her life. But the second point B, is this will not be easy. Well, I've discovered that in life. It's always right to do what's right. But the second principle is, just because it's the right thing to do doesn't mean it will be easy. In 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, verse 24, it says, then she saddled a donkey. Notice her determination. She's doing it herself. And she said to her servant, drive and go forward. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you. Boy, if those are not words of determination, what are? I'm going to see the prophet and nothing's going to stop me. Do you see what she's done? In her determination, she's decided that nothing is going to steal her promise. She's not about to allow the devil to come into her home and steal her baby boy. No, she is determined. She will fight for this child. And that brings me to the fourth point I want to share with you. Find someone to agree with you. Every one of us need that in our lives. She needed that. Even Jesus in his trial needed that, and said to his three closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, watch with me for 1 hour. Find somebody to agree with you. In 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, verse 22, it says, now when she came to the man of God at the hill, at Mount Carmel, she caught him by the feet. That's an unusual thing to do. That's not proper protocol. Now, point A, I would say, look for someone that believes the promise. She knew Elisha did. And that's why she's going to find Elisha, is because she knows that's where I received the promise. I know he will agree with me. When you find them, don't let them go. She's not trying to embarrass him, but she falls on her knees at his feet and she wraps her arms around him and she says nothing. She's just weeping and crying as she's holding on to him. Now, this shows much about the moving of the Holy Spirit in people's lives, because Elisha was a friend of God. Elisha knew secrets from God, but he didn't know what was going on here. Just because they're a prophet doesn't mean they know everything. And it's why it's wrong for us to go chasing after prophets to try to get a word from God. Go to God directly for yourself. Yes, if you need something special, God will send a prophet into your life. But the prophets don't know everything. And that's what Elisha said. He said to his servant, God has hidden this from me. I don't know what's going on. But notice something. Even though Elisha did not understand her problem, he did not reject her. That's something. I'm talking to some of you ministers right now that you need to learn that. That there's many times that people come to us and we don't know the answer. And there's been so many times I've been praying while they're talking about their problem. In my spirit, I'm crying out to God, oh God, give me a word, give me direction, show me what to do. Because many times you don't know what to do, but you must not reject the person that has come to you. Point B, desperate people forget about politeness. That's what's happened here. This woman is desperate. Her baby boy has just died. Her whole world, the promise of God, it's just come crashing in, and the devil's trying to steal the promise. Jesus said in Matthew, the 11th chapter and verse 12, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. That's exactly what this woman is doing. She's not going to take no for an answer. She's not going, no, she's holding on to him because that was where the promise had come to her. He had promised her a word from God, a promise of a son. She's not going to allow anyone to take it away. In fact, the story tells us that Gehazi, Elisha's servant, comes and he tries to pull her away. And Elisha says, no, leave her alone, because her soul is bitter. There's something that's happened that's tragic, and God's concealed it from me. Now, what I learned from that is there will always be those who try to push us away. Always. There's people that will try to discourage us. People that will tell us things like, well, you just need to expect these things. We can't expect to get through life without getting some hurt. Don't get into a quarrel with them. She's not paying any attention to Gehazi. Don't get into a quarrel with pushy people. No. And that brings me to my fifth point that I want to share. The fifth point that I see in this story is what I would say, beware of the mouth trap. Many times we fall into the trap of Satan by speaking negative. We begin to curse ourselves. We begin to disbelieve the promise of God. This lady doesn't do it, not one time. Point A that I was saying, I'm reading this from 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, verse 23. And she said, when they asked her, is it well with you? Is it well with the boy? Is it well with your husband? And she said, it is well. Now that's a statement of faith, because she knows what she's done. She's carried the boy up and laid him on the bed of the man of God. She shut the door behind her. Nobody else knows, just her. Thank God for this woman's courageous spirit, her bold faith. What Jesus said, the violent take it by force. She lays hold of the promise of God and refuses to let go. It's a statement of faith. It is well. Those were the words that she said to her husband. When you read the story, it seems like the boy's father seems clueless to what's going on. He doesn't know that the boy is dead and never asks any questions. How's the boy doing? No, he's just preoccupied with whatever the day's brought his way. She said, it will be okay. It will be well. The second thing I say, she speaks about the problem without doubting the promise. Now, I need to repeat that because that's where some of you are making your mistake. She talks about the problem without doubting the promise. And this is what so many of us do. We start talking about the problem and we start agreeing with the problem rather than agreeing with the promise. She doesn't do that. Now, I know there are some people that go around, just denying everything they don't like. And basically, that's just coming from their head, not from their spirit. How do I know? By their fruit you will know them. And I see so many people, they talk bigger than they do anything else. They talk very well, talk by the mile, walk by the inch. Now, don't fall into the mouth trap. Don't start doubting the promise of God. Lay hold of God's promise. Elisha, even though he did not know what had happened, knew that something serious had taken place for her to ride a donkey for such a long journey. He knew something serious had taken place, but her actions are not matching her positive confession, because her positive confession is coming from a heart of faith. The Bible doesn't say he that believes with the head. The Bible says he that believes with the heart, with his spirit. And that's what she's doing. And so she speaks about the problem. You'll find this 2 Kings 4:22 when she said, did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Now listen to what the woman is saying. She's talking about the promise, but she's not using any negative words. That's the mouth trap. And when we begin to talk about the promise with negative words, we're agreeing with the devil. We're agreeing with the unbelievers. That's a mistake, my friend. Don't fall into the mouth trap. When you have to talk about the problem, talk about it the way God would speak about it. Look at it through the eyes of God. Stop looking at your problem through your own eyes. Start looking at your problems through God's eyes and say what God says. It's when she says this that now the prophet understands. He knows what has to be done. He recognizes it's the boy. Something serious has happened to the boy. And now he can respond in helping to meet the need that is within her life. And so I would say to you, follow the example of this woman. Find somebody that will agree with your faith. Find somebody that will agree with you. Jesus said, if any two of you on earth shall agree as touching anything, it shall be given them of my Father which is in heaven. You've got to find the person of agreement. Don't allow the pushy people to push you away from the promise. Don't allow yourself to get caught in negative thinking, negative confession. Continue to speak the word of God, and the promise of God will be fulfilled in your life. In the next lesson, we're going to look at how this woman receives her son back to life again.